Welcome back, Guardian. In our last report, we discussed the Vex, their intricacies, and their occupation of Mars. But to better understand the Vex, we have to take a look at why they're fighting the Cabal. And to get a better understanding of the Cabal, we have to dig a lot deeper into the nature of their occupation and ground war on Mars. To start, the information we have on the Cabal is unfortunately limited to mixed reports, sightings, and of course a few mock battles and skirmishes. But I will do my best to piece together this information and present the best case for you in this report. To start, we have to define what Cabal means. Now, its actual meaning is a secret political clique or faction, which is interesting and will come into play later during this report. But we have to understand the Cabal as tactically efficient, disciplined, unrelenting. The Cabal are the greatest known military force in the system. Their origins and ultimate objectives are a mystery, but it seems clear they have conquered more worlds than humanity has ever known. Cabal soldiers, which are of course broken up into different ranks, which will be Legionary, Centurion, Colossus, Scion, and of course the Phalanx. These soldiers wear pressurized armor that replicates the environment of their high-gravity homeworld. Their field tactics depend on the ranks of legionnaires, supported by air power, elite infantry, and ultra-heavy armor. Now, before we go any deeper, we have to look at the Cabal as sort of a reference to the old Roman legionnaires. Now, whether these Roman legionnaires referencing comes from pre-Marian reforms is unknown, but we have to assume that a lot of the historical referencing that we will see here in this report seems to take a lot of inspiration from the Roman Empire in days of old. Now, the reason the pre-Marian reforms are mentioned is because of the Scion, and this is the only one it really applies to. Now, the Scion is an auxiliary unit. Now, this was done away with post-pre-Marian reforms, but prior to that, these Scions could be described as velites or can be described as non-citizen soldiers conscripted into the army, which would define sort of the reason that they do not fall into the same species category that the normal Cabal do. The Scions are smaller, much more agile, and seemingly very, very intelligent. Speaking of Cabal intelligence, their weaponry, especially their ammunition used, are actually micro-rockets. Now, these micro-rockets are fired from a various assortment of weaponry, but they all seem to do incredible damage, high impact, low velocity. But the surprising thing about this weaponry is that they resend information to the weapon itself to be used back on the battle. This is an incredible feat of technology and truly fearsome. Now, most impressive has to be the Cabal shield. Built to the same spec as Cabal hull plating, this tactical shield is nearly indestructible to conventional weapons. It has integrated sensors that relay information not only to the shield bearer, but to the Cabal battle network, allowing nearby units to coordinate more effectively. Now, during the Roman times, the Phalanx was still in use, but it was not in use by any of the Roman city-states. It was used mainly in Macedonia, or potential lower areas of Greece, such as Spartans and Athens. However, the Phalanx would be outdone by the testudo, which was the turtle formation used by Roman legionnaires during the time. It is interesting, though, that the Phalanx, as described by the Cabal, uses such technology, and of course has a very important battle network that they use in their combat against the Vex on Mars. The Cabal do not divide themselves by legions, but they seem to divide themselves in certain ways. Now, these divisions are quite obvious, and we do see the variation of Cabal on Mars, especially in their combat against the Vex. But it seems that some of the Cabal are much more experienced and fanatical than others. The numerical bulk of Cabal forces is held up by the Sand Eaters. The Cabal formation first and most frequently encountered by Guardians. The Sand Eaters represent the numerical bulk of Cabal presence on Mars. Their equipment, tactics, and morale all show the weight of a long deployment, but they continue to pursue their objectives with dogged, weary determination. Now, the Cabal presence, especially the Sand Eaters, is showing a certain tenacity, a grim persistence, if you will. Feeling or showing tiredness, however, though, is something that we do not seem to be representing in the Cabal. They are a very old race, and the lifespan of Cabal seems to reach into the hundreds, if not more, years. So it is interesting to see that they do slow down, potentially, with their war against the Vex. Next, we have to look at the Dust Giants, which are shock troops or potentially used as reinforcements. They're highly trained and heavily conditioned. Dust Giant soldiers seem to be recruited from veteran sand infantry. The Cabal order of battle positions them as a mobile reserve or a shock force rolled in to blunt major Vex offensives and to reinforce crumbling lines. So what we see here is a division of military. They seem to have forces that are much more experienced than others, and they use those forces in interesting ways. Think of the Dust Giants as the Green Berets of the Cabal shock force. Interesting soldiers utilized in very good ways to potentially stave off or starve off a defeat from the Vex or other Guardians. Next is the Siege Dancers. These are elite forward units, potentially scouting options or expeditionary forces. The Cabal's elite forward unit. The Siege Dancers are deployed into unsecured areas to take control and set up fortifications. Their tactical doctrine allows more freedom to unit commanders, perhaps because their missions face much greater unknowns. Siege Dancer engineers have observed to complete in demolition challenges. Whether this represents training or a form of recreation is unknown. So the information we have to pull here is simple. The Cabal are a heavily trained militaristic force. They seem to compete against each other, much like our own military does here on Earth. But it is interesting to see that the Cabal are mimicking this, or potentially using age-old doctrine to their advantage to produce the most highly effective soldiers in battle. It is truly a fearsome thing to see our enemy doing such things as we do. Now finally, the most fearsome. The Blind Legion. They're used to combat the Vex offensive and find artifacts. The Cabal presence on Mars is locked in an endless war with the Vex, and at the heart of this is the war with the Blind Legion. Deployed to defend vital artifacts seized from the Vex, the Legion holds its ground with a fanatic zeal. Blind Legion soldiers brave one of the most thankless tasks, grueling assignments in the Cabal order of battle, descending into buried ruins and black catacombs to sweep for Vex presence. The possible references here are like the Blind Legion, Cabal commanders such as Baracus Tharun and Primus Shaul have interest over Golden Age and Vex artifacts respectively. We see Baracus combing ruins of Clovis Bray and Shaul defending the Vex artifact used to power the Gate Lord's Eye. But what does this mean for us? Well, it simply means that they could have an interest in pre-collapse technologies. They wish to better understand the Vex and potentially defeat them. But what is truly interesting to us is we find both the Vex and the Cabal studying pre-war, pre-collapse technology from humanity, potentially hoping to learn our darker secrets or a better way to defeat us. Either implication is truly awful. In cohesion with initial reports, we can presume that while the Cabal may be potentially running from something, they may also be searching for ways to defeat humanity and the Vex, and of course, defeating whatever they may be running from. This portion of the report will delve into the information we know about the Cabal. But what we understand about the Cabal is something very interesting as well, and it sort of alludes to a portion of their name. This portion of Cabal is sort of a splinter force of their main empire. They're not essentially a part of it. They're more of a renegade faction on their own, which plays very well into the name, the Cabal in general. More in the upcoming report. The next two will come from Ghost Fragments, and to better understand these, we have to explain them a little bit more in depth. But to give you the brief synopsis, this will explain the previous sentences in terms of why the Cabal are here and are they really following orders from the main empire. I have stayed with the Cabal, even as the light in me dims. I have been too far from the traveler for too long. If I had not destined to find my own guardian, at least I can inform the city of what I've learned. I thought Mars would be the place to find a guardian. The sand preserves everything well, and Clovis Bray had been famous for attracting talent. The brave, the brilliant, the footloose, those restless on Earth and itching for fame. I stowed away aboard a Mars scout ship, hoping. What we have here is a ghost, but he did not find a guardian. What he found was information about the Cabal. Now say what you will, either implication is great assets to us. We could have used another Guardian in the field, but intelligence on the Cabal could be just as valuable. It continues to state, what I did find, however, was a way to the Cabal warbase. Their runty, piggish eyes are too dull to see me as long as I stay out of their defense systems. The Scions are a different matter. Too quick, too clever, throwing their minds around like hammers. I creep around walls or dig into a heap of canisters and watch from there. There is a vast empire behind these creatures, many star systems away. Some pledge allegiance to that far empire, obeying their ancient marching orders. Some do not. They disagree among themselves about the answers. I wish arguing Cabal on no one. They slam their painted bodies into each other with horrendous roars. Intelligence gathering has never been so painful. This Ghost Intelligence report has alluded to us that this Cabal may not be as unified as we originally think it to be. It could be again an expeditionary force, or it could be a divided faction of the Cabal hierarchy, potentially a renegade legion, if you will, running from something. But what that is, we may not know. In the rest of the Ghost Fragment report, at least in the second one, we can determine from this, for all their might and strength, for all that they have dug into Mars and flung up battle walls with their bureaucratic grimness of conquerors, I suspect they are fleeing from something. That within their hard shells and thousand-folded shields is a sharp seed of terror. But of what? Does something follow them? Should we fear it too? Now, if the Cabal are truly running from something, with all their military might, strength, and tactical prowess, what hope could we have as Guardians? Well, potentially we'll find out more in the future. Our ground war with the Cabal on Mars has been successful, as has been our battle against the Vex and the Hive, and of course the Fallen. But this information is still very shocking and quite distasteful. As we continue to discuss the enemies that plague our walls of the city and cling to our galaxy, there is one that remains, the Hive. You can guarantee that in the next report, the Hive will be explained fully, and hopefully we will see their weaknesses and their potential strengths in the next report.